Now, after today's sobering Supreme Court judgment dismissing the case filed by the main opposition People's Democratic Party seeking to disqualify the Vice President-elect Kashim Shettima on the grounds of double nomination, the steady march of Bola Ahmed Tinubu to Aso Rock has now passed the 11th hour, and the uncomfortable reality of his presidency is slowly dawning on the PDP and those desperate for change. By Monday, the Tinubu era will be properly, or as his supporters put it, insurmountably underway. And the betting wager from some political pundits is that it'll stay that way, whilst others believe that at some point the odds will beat him back, possibly in the courts, where the outcome is of course hard to predict, or possibly by one of the many controversies that have trailed his path to the presidency. Nevertheless, today's Supreme Court ruling underlines the daunting difficulty of coordinating opposition to Mr. Tinubu. So how can the man often referred to as the ultimate backroom maneuverer engineer the kind of unity that'll give his presidency a good chance of success? Well, he's got to get past the legal challenges first, doesn't he? And today he did pass the first hurdle. Well, to help us further assess today's ruling and look ahead to the inauguration on Monday, I'm joined now in the studio by the former BBC and Times of London journalist Donu Kogbara, who is currently a well-known newspaper and magazine columnist here in Nigeria, and by the policy strategist, political commentator and group CEO of the global investment and trade company Baba Yusuf. Thank you very much indeed to both of you for coming in. And let me start with you, Donu. In the long sweep of the attempts to unseat Bola Tinubu and in the context of the legal challenges that are still ongoing in court, to what extent does today's judgment stand as a seminal moment for Mr. Tinubu and the APC?
Well, I think it's critical because of the psychological impact. Because what happened today, I mean, frankly, I actually got to a point after I had written an article about it, where I was...
And I saw that article, brilliant stuff.
Oh, thank you. But
yeah.
from
the Africa Report.
Yes, in Africa Report magazine. What subsequently came up after the Supreme Court ruling was that there were some issues I had not been aware of. For example, this issue of the locus standi, which I had spoken to many lawyers from both sides of the political divide. No one told me anything about that aspect. There's so many aspects and angles that I'm confused. I don't really know the whole story. I think you need a PhD in law to really grasp everything that's going on. Yeah. But notwithstanding all that uncertainty about legal interpretations, what happened today is very significant, because basically today was the day when millions of Nigerians realized that Bola Ahmed Tinubu is going to be sworn in. For months and months and weeks and days, people have been literally on bended knee saying, "Dear God, let this not happen." Okay? So what happened today was that we were told it was going to happen for sure. And I think people had a lot of hopes around Tinubu and Shettima being tossed out today, and clearly it's not going to happen. A lot of people are in mourning. And I think that's really, I mean, of course he has his supporters too. They're probably very happy. But I'm quite surprised by the number of people who really don't want him to be sworn in, or who say that, well, if he's sworn in, they want him removed.
Well, I suppose if you look at the percentages, the voting percentages at Baba Yusuf, I mean, it shows clearly that even though he got the majority, if you aggregate the numbers of the opposition collectively, I mean, it far exceeds what he won. So a lot of people actually didn't want him to be there. But I wonder what you think about the PDP in particular and the opposition in general in the context of what happened today. I mean, does this ruling show now how hard it'll be to unseat Mr. Tinubu, who by Monday, as Donu said, will have all the federal powers of state at his disposal?
Thank you, Charles. Well, like Donu mentioned, we just have to face the reality of what is going to happen on Monday. But just to add some little bit of legal knowledge that I have, pocket knowledge, for Dunu and others that don't know this, the issues of locus had been tested severally, vis-a-vis pre- and post-election matters. In this particular instance, I heard former Minister, Honorable Minister of Aviation, Osita Chidoka, talking about it and also mentioning the instance of Uche Nwosu's matter as a reference. Although my position is the Uche Nwosu's matter is clearly different, because in the case of Uche Nwosu, he picked forms for two different political parties, the APC and the Action Alliance.
Yeah.
So that matter was pretty much very clear. In the case of the vice president-elect, it is a function of a candidature, ticket for Senate, and then a nomination for the VP. But I think the issue, looking at it from a strategic point of view, is the PDP, went with a wrong footing with this issue of locus, because it has been tested many times. You recall the issue with the current governor-elect of Delta, where some people went to court, even pre-election, to contest his emergence as the APC candidate at that time. So I think the issue of locus has been tested severally. And if so, if you are like the first law of the rule of strategy of war by Sun Tzu, if you want to go to war, you should better be prepared for it.
Absolutely.
So that is the lesson for the opposition party, especially when you are facing the state and entrenched power. You say you want to upstage, you need to do your homework very well.
That's a very
before
good
you
point.
go to court. And to my mind, this is a settled case, with regards to having gone to the Supreme Court. And what is instructive for us is to see the layers, from the first court of instance to the Court of Appeal and to the Supreme Court. And all through, the basis for the judgment, if you read the judgment, are the same with regards to the applicants. So probably if the applicants were different, for example, one of the former aspirants that contested, which is very clear, a party member and things like that. That being said, this is what it is. But to be honest, like Donu said, it provides a psychological, downer for the opposition party, and it's an indication of things moving forward. Now, talking about how difficult it will be for Tinubu to be upstaged, having been sworn in by Monday with regards to the other matters before the election petition. It goes now to tell us, the reforms that probably have to happen, further down the line in our electoral process. It is not an issue of Ashwaji Bola Ahmed Tinubu, like you also rightly mentioned earlier. From 1999 to date, we've been saying this. I like the way you flipped the coin and said in 2007, the PDP confessed to say there were irregularities when the Tinubus were on the other side of the divide. So I believe it's a political evolution. It will continue fine-tuning. The United States of America is over 200 years democracy. We still see what happened at the Capitol and other things, and that Trump saying he still wins the election.
Right. Okay.
So moving forward, I think that is what will happen, but it's going to be an uphill task, for the president-elect to be upstaged.
I'm glad you set that out, but that's an important point he's made, Donu, and that's an important thing to keep in mind. I mean, the question is whether we're going to hear, like we heard Yaradua say, like we heard Jonathan say, whether we're going to hear Bola Tinubu say, well, my election was flawed, and therefore I'm going to institute reforms to ensure that those flaws never happen again. But in spite of that, I mean, it must be a sobering thought for him as he, if you like, canters towards his inauguration on Monday, that so many people, as you mentioned in Nigeria, 63% of the people who actually voted did not vote for him.
Absolutely. And you have to look at the different personality types. I mean, Yaradua was an intellectual with a humble personality. And given to truthfulness. It was his sort of like default setting was to be truthful. I'm not sure that you can say that about Tinubu, though I'm sure the man has his own strengths. I'll say one thing for him, because some people think I hate Tinubu like poison, right? one thing I will say for him is that I do know people who work for him and who have worked with him, and he's really been very nice to most of them.
Well, to be fair, I actually hear he's a very friendly, very sort of
he's a nice boss.
amiable
Yes.
sort of chap.
Yes, and I've met him, and he was very amiable when I met him. I met him with my governor, actually, in 2019 in London. So, you know, it's just... But that's on the plus side. On the other side, I don't really see him and his cohorts going around being intellectually honest and saying, you know, kind of, there were flaws and we're not perfect. They seem to have the complete opposite personality type to Yar'Adua, which is to bulldoze your way through, admit to nothing, and sort of like never say sorry, never display any, never make any concessions, you know? So
that's a bit of a, that kind of rubs people up the wrong way.
Yes, it does. It upsets people a great deal. They never go back on anything. And sorry, that's not my kind of politician.
Nevertheless, Baba Yusuf, I mean, we are going to see a Tinubu presidency from Monday. In terms of what he'll inherit, he's got to contend with an economy that's barely grown in the last decade, that's short on jobs, short on investment. What's the best way for him to deal with that?
That's a catch-22 situation. Ashwaji Bola Ahmed Tinubu is taking mantle of leadership as one of the most critical moments in the history of this country. Before you even talk about economy, we need to talk about security or insecurity. We need to talk about national unity. Until you have the two, before you start talking about economy. And all the indices are not looking good. If I will just, you know, reel out numbers to you, you know, we have an economy that will be bequeathed to him. Before the economy, the global firepower index, you know, that rates military capabilities of countries, rates Nigeria 4th in Africa in 2023, behind Egypt, behind Algeria, right? And this is a country that has about 1/4 of the population of Africa. So coming forth tells you the dire situation the country is, facing the vagaries of insecurity, terrorism, and banditry and whatnot, right? And we have done slippages 4 steps backward since 2015. Then you have the issue of the polarization. I hear from the speech of acceptance speech of Ashwaji Bola Ahmed Tinubu talking about recognizing the need for national healing, you know, which remains to be seen. I look forward to that because it's a critical success factor for him to stabilize and to be able to even add value. Then talking about economy, a debt stock inheritance of about 77 trillion. You know, you are living over 133 Nigerians multidimensionally poor. You came in 2015, you know, dollar was about 198 official rate. He's going to take over dollar at 460 something, and in a very scarce situation. You know, the numbers are not looking good. Debt to GDP ratio of about 23%, right? And it can go on and on. And then all the booby traps, the contract bazaar and the loan bazaar that has happened in the last 3 weeks, and the reports we are seeing that leaves much to be desired from ministry to ministry, sector to sector. Education, you know, the crisis that is going to be left behind with the lecturers. We saw the deception and the confusion created in one of the biggest economic gateways in Nigeria, the aviation sector. I am very sure when Tinubu opens what is called the book of reality, what I call the book of reality is beyond the scorecards being reeled out, but he will see from his situation analysis what will happen. Is going to be very tough. He's going to run into socio-economic headwinds. Only God can help us.
Well, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
My prayer is that pride and shame will get to him. What I mean by that is that when you have so many people, many of them serious individuals, saying that you're totally useless, you're a crook, you're this, you're that, the best thing you can do is say, I'll show you, I'll prove you wrong.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
I really hope that if Tinubu is what we're stuck with for the next few years, and I say maybe that he performs in a way that will make me use a different word than stuck in future. Because right now I see him as an imposition. But I really hope, because he's clearly a very intelligent man, okay? And he's good at talent spotting. He's picked some good people to work with over the years. He's resilient. All this stuff about whether he went to primary school in Kafanchan or, you know, Guinea or wherever, I don't really care, because he has the brains, right? So if he will just prove me and other doubters wrong, out of shame and out of pride, and say, you know what, in 1 year's time, people like you are going to turn around and say that you were wrong about me.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. And I was going to bring up, before you started talking, because I mean, Baba Yusuf was talking about this a minute ago, the really big elephant in the room. And I think he kind of gave his assessment in sort of order of the way things ought to go. Before you get to the economy, you've got to get past insecurity and unify the country. And that's a big elephant in the room. After all that has happened, the deep divisions during President Buhari's time in office, which has been exacerbated by the disputes over the election results, can Mr. Tinubu really unite this country? And I'm going to ask you the same question.
Well, the remarks that were made about Igbos and non-Yoruba Southerners generally in Lagos during the election have not helped. There's a lot of bitterness about the rudeness and nastiness and ethnocentric bigotry that was flung around during the election. Tinubu needs to address that. You know, I suppose anybody can do anything if they put their minds to it, especially an intelligent man like Tinubu. The thing is, will he acquire the moral fiber and the emotional intelligence to do the needful to pull Nigerians together?
Well, we're going to have to watch and see. I've got about a minute left. Some have suggested, one British journalist in fact said that Mr. Tinubu will have difficulty uniting Nigeria because he is the living embodiment of what is driving Nigeria apart.
Well, I slightly disagree. I will take it from what Donu said earlier. That optimism, you know, the statement was laced with some level of optimism with respect to Donu. I don't think Tinubu came this far to go in history as a failure. He now has more reasons to prove to us Nigerians that indeed, not just having the capability or capacity, he can unite Nigerians.
Right.
And that unless he does that, I strongly believe Tinubu has the emotional intelligence to understand that he needs to do that to even achieve anything.
Right, okay.
In this administration.
Okay, I'm going to have to leave it there.
Absolutely.
I really apologize, but what you're saying is fascinating. Baba Yusuf is a policy strategist, political commentator, and group CEO of the Global Investment and Trade Company, and Donu Kogbara is a former BBC and Times of London journalist who is currently a well-known newspaper columnist here in Nigeria. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.